Hello, guys, and welcome to the No Strings Attached episode. Another fantastic episode. And now I have a pleasure of hosting Lindsay. Dennis, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Great to
Really
be here.
excited. Yeah, really excited to have you here. And why don't you first maybe start by telling us how did you become a coach?
Oh, wow. Well, that's that's a long time ago. That's over 30 years ago. But basically, I was an elite level athlete myself. Went to the highest level I could. Was very fortunate, but always felt like there was something missing. So decided that because I didn't quite make the Olympics the way that I wanted to for my sport, I wanted to go back to the Olympics as a coach. So I decided to spend the time working as a strength conditioning coach because that's also where I felt there was a weakness at that time 30 years ago, and started working in that field. Specifically started in therapy, but then just focused on coaching high performance after that.
That's pretty cool. And at what level did you start coaching high performance? Was it kids right away, or you worked with
So I
professional
was,
athletes, or how did that
yeah,
happen?
I think I was very fortunate. I started off working in a multiple of different spots, but I would have some really elite athletes, but also have lots of young kids. So I find personally that what was good about that was it wasn't I wasn't limited. I had to learn all coaching philosophies. I had to learn how to change your programming method relative to the age group you had in. I had to learn to use science across every age group, and more importantly, I also had to use every sport. So it wasn't a matter of just doing a sport that you were good at or prominent at or that you were local to. It was you had to be able to be good at a bit of everything. I think that's probably because I started off in more of a therapeutic background, so
Hmm.
it forced me to have to think outside the typical box of what I might have wanted to.
Hmm.
So,
And what do you find your like initial experiences as a coach? What were you struggling with, perhaps, and maybe
another
decided
great
like,
question.
yeah.
Well, the struggle, I think, when you're younger, the struggle becomes, especially say strength conditioning back then, it wasn't like now very easy to find strength conditioning coaches. Back then, there weren't many of us doing that specifically across all the different sports. You might find it in football, you might find it in hockey back then, but you wouldn't find it in tennis necessarily or other sports like that. It was just becoming a thing. Golf didn't have strength conditioning that much. Nowadays, it's very prominent. So back then, the trick was more educating people on what the purpose was and why you were doing what you were doing. And because it was relatively new, educating people on the science instead of just going with the typical things they always knew. You know, coaches would think, well, I don't want the kids to strength train because it's going to hurt their growth. I don't want the kids to strength train because it's going to slow them down. And trying to explain the science to coaches when there was nothing out there to really, prominently back it up for you with a lot of evidence. It was just talking about science. You had to really use your science quite well.
Mhm. I have a question for you. How important do you think for strength and conditioning coaches to play the sport at a certain level to coach it?
Um, so as a fitness coach, everybody's going to expect me to say, oh, they're really important. Strength conditioning is the most important thing. And obviously I do it. So I do believe that, but you know, it's a teamwork thing. So I think it goes on the phase of the athlete in development, and it also goes on the specific phase that you might happen to be in right now, either by decision, by choice, or just by accident or happenstance. And what I mean by that is, as soon as an athlete gets injured, for example, the primary person becomes the physio. The secondary person might become the strength conditioning coach, and the third person might become the coach of the athlete. So in your case, the tennis coach. Um, but then when they're getting ready for peak conditioning and peak competition, the tennis coach is the primary. The fitness coach is the secondary, and the physio should be the third person kind of in line. So I think we all kind of have to move around the athlete as the athlete's needs adjust. And that could be literally monthly, definitely several times throughout the year, and multiple times throughout their career.
Yeah. So I'll rephrase the question, I guess, maybe like how important it is for a strength and conditioning coach to really have played the sport that the
Ah,
athlete, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So sorry,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
my English, but
No, no,
that was a great insight anyway. Like I
no.
think we'll talk more about it later, but maybe if you could elaborate on
Okay,
that
so
one.
that's another great question. So myself, for instance, I've worked with tennis for since I've worked with tennis for almost 25, 6 years now at a pro level, right down to a development level. and I don't play tennis. I picked up a racket. I play occasionally. I would say I play at tennis. I don't play tennis. Most of the kids that I train could just mop me across the court, no problem. But I think the difference is learning. One, a fitness coach should know all the mechanics and all the physiology behind what's required, so they know the science of it. And tennis coaches know the art of tennis and the application of tennis mechanics, but not necessarily always biomechanics. So as a fitness coach, if you have the foundation of anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, all those things, you can really program almost any athlete. So your knowledge in the actual sport doesn't have to be as high as the tennis coaches does. But you should definitely know aspects of the sport, the ins and outs of winning, the basic elements of progression, everything from different density balls to different types of rackets to stringing, all those things that can affect the fitness and health of an athlete all the way along. You should be able to learn those things as you're progressing in the sport. When I first started in tennis, I didn't know much. I absorbed an awful lot in the first 2 years just to learn more about the sport and watch the sport a ton so I could be better for the athletes that I was working with.
That makes sense. And, it always comes back to getting more educated, getting knowledgeable, and just.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think as any coach, you have to do that. And I also think the problem you run into is it's very easy to assume that, because I play tennis, I'm going to be a great fitness coach for tennis. That doesn't mean anything. There are world-class players who've proven they can't coach at a world-class level in all kinds of sports. There's other world-class players who can jump right in and be the most amazing coach ever. So I think it's more you have to fold yourself into the craft and understand the purpose for the athlete. Because as you know, of course, for instance, tennis, a lot has changed in the past 15, 20, 25 years. Not just with equipment, but with rules, not just with rules, but with athletes, not just with athletes, but with coaching, with, elements of risk on the court and off the court. So I think, you're always adapting, you're always learning. You can't get stuck in your little mold, and you can't assume just because you did it or you knew it 20 years ago that you know it now. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. Very important points that everything is changing quite fast. And if you're if you're not in it, like you're losing the sense of like where your athletes should be heading, and that's
absolutely
can cost them some important points, career, anything.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, since we talked about the knowledge of the coaches and importance of coaching, how can a parent decide if this is a good strength and conditioning coach for my son, or even a tennis coach, without knowing, because typically the coaches would recommend, okay, go to Dennis. He's awesome. But what would make somebody say that Dennis is awesome or John is awesome, or, so what are the things that we should look out for?
Right. Again, another great question. So, Bogdan, when I first met you guys at Tennis Canada doing the stuff there, I'd been there as the national level coach for 10 years. I think what I told people then and what I told coaches then and what I tell parents all the time is, number one thing is they should always ask questions, always ask the questions they want answers for. And they should always be able to and expect to, if they want, to see a plan. If whether it's the tennis coach or the fitness coach or whatever kind of coach, if they're going to work with your child, my attitude is treat your child like you are the house and they are an extension on your house. If you're going to hire a contractor to come and build an extension on your house, you want to know certain elements of what's going to go on. The contractor can't have all the guarantees. The contractor can't, predict weather and predict everything perfectly, but they can definitely say, realistically, within this time frame, I'm going to have this extension built. Realistically, within this much budget, this is going to be done. Realistically, we're going to run into a few problems here and there. We need to have this leeway in the budget. They can come up with most of the problems ahead of time. So a good coach has a good plan, and that plan can always be adjustable, but they always have a plan. So that parent can go back and say, hey, just curious, what's the plan for Joey? How's he going to get from this point to this point? And the coach will be able to sit down and actually physically show them the plan and where it's going. I think when coaches don't have a plan that's actually written down, that's that old saying of, plan to fail or fail to plan. You have to decide what you want to do. And if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. We want athletes and we want coaches all the time who have a goal. And if we get mad at athletes for not sticking with a goal or having a goal and trying to push for that goal, and how come you're not trying hard enough? The first question becomes, does the plan even dictate that? Does the plan even exist? And I've seen lots of coaches in lots of sports and fitness coaches in lots of places that don't actually have a written plan across the next 12 weeks or across the next 3 months or 6 months or 10 months. They don't have anything kind of drawn up. They're just going by the feel of it. And while I think that's a terrific way to be a very creative and artsy kind of coach, I think you still have to have a base outlined. It may not be a perfectly periodized every single day, every single hour, but you should have a generic goal that you're trying to attain each week that builds on the goal for the next week, so that we can tell that kid, here's where you're going to go to. We can tell that parent, here's where we're going to get them to. Just like school, it should be a curriculum. Every 3 months, I know if I'm passing or failing. I know if I'm accomplishing the task I need to get to the next grade level or the next course. I know if I'm progressing. It should simply be like that.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. It's, as a parent or as a tennis coach, if you're trying to, build a team around your player, just by asking a question like that, like, what is the plan? How do you see, what's your vision? How do you see that player in 1 year and 5 years? Like, just by asking that, just by listening to the coach answer, you can pretty much hear their philosophy, hear if you like what
Exactly.
what's coming, what's going to happen. Like, and you basically choose a coach based on, like, do you like what you hear? Do you like that vision, pretty much?
Yeah.
And then, you take it from there. And it's also making you accountable as a coach.
That's exactly, I was just going to say, that's probably the main thing I like about it is, if I'm going to make an athlete accountable, I have to be somewhat accountable.
Exactly.
My pet peeve is hearing coaches, I heard a lot in the past, say things like, oh, hey, look, did you see my athlete won this tournament? And look how great this is. This is amazing. And I'm like, okay, I really appreciate that. And that's great that your athlete won the tournament. And it's great that you're proud of them. But you're taking some sort of credit for it. Are you also taking credit for the times when they don't do so well at a tournament? Are you taking all the credit and all the heat at the right times on yourself? Not because a parent points it out to you, but are you actually taking it yourself? That's what's going to make you so much better at trying to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Because when you're accountable out in front of everybody and it's obvious, then there's no excuse of saying, well, the athlete didn't do what I said. Well, as a coach, if the athlete didn't do what I said, that's bad coaching. I have to pull that athlete aside sometimes and say, you're not following direction. Let's sit down, hammer this out, and figure out what the problem is. But you need to follow the direction, because that's why you have me. That's why I'm here to help you. And if they can't follow that direction, then that's the problem, perhaps. Sometimes in coaching, because we're all struggling to also run a business, we make bad decisions to try and keep our client, but then we lose focus on the purpose of the client, which is to get results in performance. So our service and our product is actually the program. The athlete is a moving part of that program, but the athlete is not ours. The athlete could move to another academy next week. The athlete could go to a different gym, 2 months from now. The athlete could be with you for 10 years and then gone all of a sudden one day. And not for any other reason, simply it just happens. And if that does happen, did you still do a good job to set them up for wherever they're going to go? And you can sit back and say, I did the best I could for that athlete.
No, it's listen, so many good points in that answer. Just like, I couldn't agree more. I had a sit down with a parent maybe half a year ago, and we were just going over the progress of the student, and the parent was happy about one aspect that improved, and they mentioned, well, but the volleys didn't really improve. And I said, well, I agree, volleys didn't improve because like 90% of the things we worked on, serve, return, ground strokes, because that was, we really needed to focus on it. But now that it's at a decent level, we're going to start bringing more volleys and more. So, like admitting kind of like, yeah, for sure. Like, I agree. It's not trying to convince, no, it's okay. But like, no, it's not getting better because we didn't work on it, or, we need to change our focus, or, just so you can move on. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, I think it's if anything, it builds trust, builds credibility, and you as a professional, like, you have to own up your mistakes sometimes, and we make
Yeah,
mistakes. Surprise, coaches make mistakes.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's so
And we learn. I mean, we look back at things. You look back at things you do in tennis now that 5-6 years ago you said no, don't do that. But then after time has evolved, it's like this is the new thing, and everybody's doing it, and it's actually right. It's better. It's more efficient. It's been proven now. There's more evidence to prove it. Same thing in fitness. We have all kinds of exercises in fitness. Like again, I said I've been in this for 30 years, over 30 years. I have seen so many trends come and go around and around and around. And every time they come back, we have a new way to apply them, but they're not new. Foam rollers, not new. Swiss balls, not new. Medicine balls, not new. Band exercises, dynamic warm-ups, mobility versus flexibility, old argument. It's been around for 30 years. People think it's all new because they're just getting bombarded on Instagram or social media or something like that, and they don't understand that we don't have a whole lot of new science or a whole lot of new theory. We have to reapply really good theory that we know by evidence in our own programs and programs around us actually works. And so if you have to adjust, I agree with you. I think it's very important as a coach to be humble enough to be able to know you have to adjust. But if you have that written plan in front, even if you do adjust, you can sit with that parent and say, well, here's where we adjusted, and here's why that volley wasn't doing so good, or here's why this other shot wasn't doing so good, because we really need to fix the serve because the serve all of a sudden went down, or they hurt their shoulder, or they hurt something else, and this was out for a little bit, so we had to change the plan. But again, if you have a plan written out, it's really easy to show why, where, and when you made that change and how you want to adjust things. I think it makes everybody accountable and it makes everybody happy.
No, 100%. And I want to ask you, like, since you brought up like trends and like things that like you were thinking, maybe good and then they turn out bad, and then the other way around. What are the things that maybe in your career you kind of look back at and you're like, 10 years ago I coached, this thing, and then it turned out maybe like there's a better way. Like, is there, or the other way, maybe like you weren't really paying attention to certain things, and then all of a sudden, well, actually this is the thing. This is the way to go.
Yeah, that's another great question. I think in strength and conditioning and performance conditioning, probably the number one thing is we got really hyped up about 10 years ago on the idea of, just doing lots of short intensity kind of workloads, only doing, HIIT training where it was going to be something like, 30 seconds on the bike, 30 seconds off, 30 seconds on the bike, 30 seconds off. And we lost, I think, a really big fundamental element, which is this idea of having a good aerobic base. And when we lost that, we lost it at just the perfect time when social media, Facebook, all these other things boomed, and then Instagram came along and Twitter and all these other things. So now kids are even less likely to spend long time doing work. They want short and quick. They want the intensity. So 15, 20 years ago, we did a lot more stuff where it was, you have to run at least 2 or 3 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes. And it didn't matter how old you were. And the reason for that wasn't about making you a marathon runner. It has nothing to do with the marathon abilities of that. It was simply the fact of the number one thing, do you have toughness? Can you mentally stay in your task for 45 minutes? Run, stay at this pace. Can you physically last 45 minutes? If you can last 45 minutes at 60 or 70% of your typical fast kind of run speed, then you can last on a tennis court for 45 minutes. And now you have more behind what you want to do when you're on the tennis court. The short bouts definitely work the whole body, and they're great, and they're sexy, and they're hard, and they look amazing. But the dull, boring stuff is still the key. Same with tennis, I think. The 50-ball drill, still a key. You'll find it everywhere in the world. It will never go away. It should never go away. Yeah. Progressions in building your serves up, and progressions in those types of things. They should all still be there because those are fundamentals. And I think what we did was we got almost so sport specific that we dropped some things. And I wouldn't say that I like that. So I've actually, for our programming, I've brought the cardio stuff back in. We've always done cardio in the program, but we now have athletes do cardio outside of our program, because for them to come to spend 45 minutes with us just to ride on a bike isn't really a good use of their money and time. I'd rather they're here for the stuff that they can't do on their own. They can run, skip, bike, whatever, swim, whatever they want to do for 45 minutes on their own time, at least 2 times a week, that will make a world of difference to a lot of these kids.
Yeah, I mean, tennis players used to run so much, right? Like you were saying, 45 minutes, like 1 hour, like former pros, like you would hear stories like that. Right now, it's again shifting to a different dynamic. People have less time. Like kids have less time to do stuff. They're overbooked. We can talk about it later, but definitely that's also part of the the problem, I guess, because you still need to run. Like, I'm sorry, like you want to be an athlete, you got to be able to last, like you said.
The thing we go for with that, Bogdan, is the idea that it's if you look at all your coaching manuals, and that's something that we use every day in the gym, is it's physical literacies. There are 3 major physical literacies: run, jump, and throw. If you kick a soccer ball, you're throwing your leg at the soccer ball, that's a throw. If you are running, that's pretty obvious. There's all different intensities of running, but running is still just a physical literacy. We are born, we crawl, we walk, and then we start to run. We start to move. As soon as we're able to, we do it out of all kinds of things. We do it out of fear. We do it out of happiness, out of joy. A kid gets excited, they jump up and down, they run around the room. It's a natural instinct for us to run. So we should be encouraging this idea of use what's good for us that gives us this credible foundation in basic movements. And the most important thing that people forget is, running 45 minutes might not lend itself directly to being a maximally better tennis player. What it will do is it builds things like tendons, ligaments, cartilage and joints. It builds up toughness in bones. It actually builds bones itself by having that constant, small, lower impact driven thing. It has, great muscle endurance capabilities. It has great heart and lung performance capabilities. How many kids do you hear of nowadays who are like, oh, I cramp a lot in the summertime, and then everyone wants to change their diet? And we know now that most cramping that happens in any kind of endurance sport, anything that goes over an hour, it's not as much diet as it is how the muscles are trained. If they're not trained to perform consistently for a long period of time, regardless of whether they're getting tons of water or not, regardless of whether they're properly fueled with all the sodium or not, they will still start to kind of backfire, and you'll get cramping going on. If you run enough, then you won't have cramping. Soccer players don't get too many cramps. They run 10 to 14 kilometers every single game. If you play a lot, you're going to run more kilometers. If you play little, you're going to run less kilometers. But they do that as a regular part of what they train, so they don't lose that. And we think that tennis players run around the court, but they don't. They do almost as much stopping as they do starting. So if they can run on the side and get all that development of all those muscles and tendons and ligaments and bones and get the whole unit working properly and have that physical literacy down pat of just how to run, balance, knees, position, body, movement, all that stuff, it makes the court seem so easy, like just so simply easy. It's not even funny, because in your brain, I can handle 45 minutes in the heat, running straight, no problem. This is tennis. I can do this because tennis is what I love. Yeah. So it should add to your resilience, and it should add to your mental toughness, and it should add to so many things just with 45 minutes of just going out at a nice, steady pace. You don't have to be a sprinter. You don't have to be a marathon winner. Just steady pace.
Put your music on and let's go.
Exactly. Fade out and actually get away from your sport a little bit, which isn't a bad thing, right? Like cross training is great, and we don't have enough of that. We honestly don't have enough of that. We have kids now who are way over specializing, especially since COVID. Even higher specialization than I've ever seen in 30 years of doing this. Yeah. Kids who are trying so hard to play parents playing catch up or kids playing catch up, and that's not the way it works. We don't have to go back to over specializing. We need to go back to basic foundations. Yeah. Just get back to the basics.
Fantastic, and that's a great segue into my next question: is when should a kid, an athlete, a player, at what age should they start doing fitness, for example? Like I don't want to say specialized as in tennis specific, but just going out there and looking for a fitness coach, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I can lay it out for you in both questions in the same answer. So what we basically tell people is, we start as young as 8 years old. Now, we start as young as 8 years old primarily for the one factor of the physical literacies. If kids at that age aren't playing enough sports, but they are playing one sport and they're already up to say that, 8 hours a week or whatever it happens to be, or some along those lines, that's a lot for that young aged athlete. So they need to counterbalance that with other things that will cross over. So if they're not playing, say, soccer and something else on the side as well, then strength conditioning is going to be great for them, because we can work on all those other physical literacies: balance, rotations, movements, double stepping, all kinds of things that have to involve that coordination level, that if they only play tennis, they'll get really good at those skills in tennis, but they won't be able to work outside the box that they've created. So 8 years old, we start. Then we work on more physiologic type fitness between 8 and 12 years old, because the hormone base isn't up enough. So it's really not about strength. Whenever we use weights, it's about teaching them either good form, good technique, or it's about where their balance points are, because a lot of kids don't balance properly. And again, our job is to understand the biomechanics. A tennis coach's job is to understand the mechanics of hitting a ball, the mechanics of tennis, but they don't always melt together. So our job should be to make sure that athlete, no matter what sport they play, because it doesn't matter up to 12 years old, if you're going to be a tennis player or a hockey player or a soccer player, it's going to be, can you stand on one leg? Can you rotate your body without losing your balance? Can you do all these other physical literacies put together? So the strength program is more about how are you using your body. Then at 13, 14, it's preparatory work for actual performance fitness, just like our coaching kind of levels that we go through. So now they're getting ready. They're in the train to train stage. They're in the train to develop stage. They're going through all these things in those first little two phases. So at 13, 14, we're now getting in the train to train and the train to compete type stage. And then at 15 and 16, we start pushing them harder and pushing them further. And now they're training to perform. And after 16 years old, they are training to win. Like they want to go out there and actually compete at a high level and get higher performance. So we go through all those phases with athletes that are with us. And I've been fortunate in my career that a lot of the athletes I have been with me for multiple amounts of years, not just 1 year here or 1 year there. They've been with me for 5, 6, 7 years in some cases. And we've been able to help them progress and develop all along that, because we have control over seeing how much they actually are developing. But when a parent looks for a strength program, you can start at any phase you want to start at. The trick, again, is to ask that question of that coach: what's your plan? How does my kid fit into this plan? And what does my kid need? What's my kid going to be doing? If we're just making a kid, if you have a 10-year-old pushing a sled down the gym, well, if the 10-year-old can't lunge properly yet and can't run well yet, why are we having them push a sled? It's sexy. It looks really cool. Mom and dad think it's so hard, but it's way too advanced and way too specialized. And not because it's going to hurt them. It's just way out of the box of what they need right now. They need the fundamentals, really sound fundamentals.
Yeah, this is crucial, and you see similar things in tennis as well, when, like you said, like you see something, like parents or maybe some coaches, like younger coaches, they see something on Instagram or like on YouTube or somewhere, and it's like you don't know where that information is coming from. Yes, it's on the screen. Yes, it maybe has like a lot of views, but it's not a definition of proven research, proven like exercise that works. And that's not what your kid may be doing. If like you see some big dude with muscles doing that, doesn't mean like your 10-year-old have to do it. So
no,
it's absolutely fantastic that you're bringing that up, and this is very important.
It's actually funny you mentioned that, Bogdan, because there's in the ITF journal, the the International Tennis Federation journal, there's an article that just came out like last year, April 22, and it was done in Croatia, but it's basically the credibility of Instagram-based information on strength and conditioning in tennis, and it shows clearly in this article that people are listening to stuff that has no correlation, isn't affecting anything at all, especially in the younger age groups. It's way too advanced, and in most cases, it's not even sound science.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can try and fight it all the time, but really, what am I going to do then? I have to spend my time on Instagram trying to be like a jerk to somebody else's profile and say, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, who wants to be that guy either? I just worry about the athletes coming to see me and focus on them, make sure they feel good. But I do like educating parents, making sure they know the right things. But once somebody sees something they're really happy about and they really like to do, you sometimes can't stop them from doing it. I remember when we talked one time about a couple of years ago at one of the tournaments, and one of the things we were talking about was, how kids are moving and how athletic they are. And I remember the comment we were talking about was watching kids who were only 10 or 11 years old leave the ground to hit the ball. And as a strength conditioning coach and somebody working on these fundamentals all the way through, I see that right away. I'm saying that's wrong. They shouldn't be leaving the ground to hit the ball yet. They don't have that power. They don't have that speed. The pros do, yes, and they're mimicking the pro. But all the coaches in their environment, in my opinion at the time, and I still stand by it now, should have been trying to literally ground them and say, stay down, stay on the ground, move there well, get planted, hit the ball solid, like get all the fundamentals. Don't get all fancy yet and make it look flashy because, yeah, you're wearing the bandana like Federer and, yeah, you've got all the gear on, but you're not Federer yet. Like there's a progression to this. Federer didn't leave the ground right away all the way through his youth. You have to get to a certain point when you do. Monfils wasn't leaving the ground when he was in juniors all the time. Once you get to a certain age, like 16, 17, that high performance level, boom, these guys and girls start to explode. But in the basics, when you see them at 12 years old, 13 years old, they were solid, down, and the fundamentals were tight. And that, I think that's something that, it changes as we go, and people get hot on one idea and they flash and the fad and the movements and how it looks, and they try and copy things, and copy paste doesn't always work.
No, 100%. Since we talked about, kids and them starting in fitness, how much time should they allocate for that? Maybe you can kind of go over, like at 8, 9, like 10 to 12, 14 to 16, kind of like a pathway in terms of how much time as a tennis player you want to dedicate to fitness.
Sure. And again, another great question. And as you know, I've dealt with this for so long. We've seen the trends change back and forth. As a fitness coach, people will expect I'm going to try and sell a lot of fitness. And I'm not a big fan of that. I really, there's times and seasons with some of the athletes that have come and see me where I say to them, I don't expect to see you for 2.5 months, for 3 months. Like you're at peak right now. Go and peak. You've done all your hard work. Maintain what we've given you. If we can give them a program that they can take them online, they'll do it. Fantastic. But I'm not the kind of person to want to sell you. You have to be in my gym, 5 days a week doing stuff. But there are some numbers we should be trying to hit for athletes in their plan. So the young kids, the most important thing for parents to know is when your kid is between the age of 8 and 12 years old, that's still all the same ballpark. The drills are what change throughout their fitness program, but the numbers don't really change. The volumes don't really change. So typically what it works out to be is if you only do one session a week for 1 hour, that is basically not even maintenance. You're just keeping muscle memory and some brain memory going. And you remember 8 to 10 years old, the quality of brain memory isn't really high on the things that they don't love to do yet. So that's what you're doing when you do 1 time a week. 2 times a week is working on maintenance. You can maintain whatever you've developed so far. And again, most of that is muscle memory, movement memory, allocation, direction, those types of things. And then when they get to being in that 12 and up age group, back to the 8 to 12, 3 times a week is actually performance. But again, I tell most parents, your kids might not need that. If they're only doing 8 hours in a tennis court, they don't need a lot more than 2 hours in fitness, as long as they're getting some other cross-training sports at school or wherever else that are consistent sports, not like at recess they go and play soccer. If they actually play a sport differently than the other sport they're doing, like tennis, then I think that's more than enough. Cross-train, have some fun, play a different sport, play different things, have different mobilities. Then we get to 12 years old, the same numbers kind of exist, but they get more specific. 1 time a week is maintenance, and it's strength maintenance because they've got some strength now and they've got a base for whatever they're doing. And even if they're brand new to strength conditioning at 12 because they didn't do anything from 8 to 12, they still have the turnover starting to happen with hormones. So they're getting ready to have that strength base. So they will get that muscle memory and they will use it. 2 times a week, we'll work on gaining some performance, but still kind of pushing maintenance. 3 times a week is increased performance. And between 12 and 14 years old, we can see a big jump in those categories. And it's never the same. You can't predict it. Some kids are already looking like a 14-year-old at 12, and some kids look like a 12-year-old at 14. So it's not about just their growth. It's about the whole package, how they think, how they feel, how they move, how strong they are, all those types of things. And then at 15 and 16, we have the same kind of category where 1 time a week is purely, we're back to that same thing of muscle memory, because now they're starting strength training. So if we're talking, say, about something like squats or cleans or even deadlifting or anything else like that with a certain amount of weight, then they forget the rules we give them because we only see them once a week. So they're working on their muscle memory and brain memory again and trying to remember the cues that they have to do and they have to use properly. If they do 2 times a week, then they're working on performance. If they do 3 times a week, they're working on increasing performance. And that holds true from that point on. After 16, it typically gets to, you want to push from minimum 2 times a week to up to 5 times a week, and that depends on your competition phase, if you have the time to do that. Now, the only other thing I'd recommend would be, we also look at volumes relative to their weekly numbers. If you're doing less than 10 hours, you only need about 2 hours of fitness. Need. If you want to get a bit more, you can get a bit more, but you don't need more. So anywhere between 20 and 40%. You don't need more than 40%. So if you're doing, 10 hours of 10 hours of tennis, then you don't need any more than 4 hours of fitness, and you shouldn't have any less than 2 hours of fitness. And then when you get to the other age groups above that, you're looking at the same kind of concept. If you have at 14 to 16, if you're doing now up to like 15, all the way up to like 20 hours or so, then you should be doing the same kind of percentages. So if you're doing 20 hours of fitness, and 20% of that load is, of course, a few more hours, and then if you're doing, so you're to the 4-hour mark, and if you're doing 40%, you're going to be up to having almost 8 hours of fitness a week. And that brings in especially that need to do that extra hour or two when you're doing that long distance cardio stuff that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That part of that fitness doesn't have to just be in the gym, doesn't have to be just on tennis court. What I do like is, I personally like when tennis coaches add some fitness elements into their practice sessions. At the end of practice sessions for 10 or 15 minutes, actually dedicate fitness time to work on things like, could be sprints, could be speed, could be running, could be something else, but something that we know can transfer and fairly quick and fairly easy. When they add that 10 minutes every day, and the kid's there in a week doing 20 hours, then they're getting quite a bit more fitness added into their program without having to come separately to a different place to do it, right? So, yeah. I endorse that. Now, fitness coaches don't always endorse that because they want that business for themselves. But having worked in all these different sport organizations at the national level, that I can't say that I loved it for 10 years while I was with Tennis Canada, and now I don't like it because I'm running a gym outside of Tennis Canada. That would be hypocritical. So I still like it. It's still very important, and I'm not afraid of a tennis coach helping to do certain fitness elements on the tennis court. And if I feel something's being done not the way I want it done, then it's up to me to go and talk to that tennis coach, or it's up to me to mention something to that tennis coach and to help them out. Not to mention it to them like they're taking my job, to mention it to them like, hey, how else we can do this better so that all your athletes can perform what they need to perform. If everybody's open to the ideas, then we're always going to get better, all of us, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you put the player in front, and like we are in this, player first, exactly. So we are in this business, hopefully, because it's still a business, but we are here to help. Yeah, our job is to improve performance of an athlete.
Like I said, our product is the program. Our product isn't the player.
Yeah,
the player's part of the process, but our product is the program. So if we want a good program to help that player get as far as they possibly can, then we have to do the most we can, because that player isn't our player. We don't own them. They could be with somebody totally different 3 years from now. If I do a good job with most of the tennis players that come and see me, I'd say, 60 to 80% of them should be getting ready to go off to university at some point, which means for 4 years, they're not mine. They're not mine for strength conditioning. They don't belong to the tennis coach back here in Toronto. They were in our stable. They were with us for a long time, and they are still part of our family and our culture and our program. But they're gone now for 70% of the year to a school that actually physically owns them now. And they tell them what to do day in and day out. So our job is to get them ready for that and be okay setting them free on it. So because we don't own them, we shouldn't be worried about trying to focus on the player in that way. The focus on the player should be, like you said, player first. The program is here to uplift the player, and the program can be adjusted to uplift the player better.
Exactly. I really like that formula that you mentioned about the 40%, of hours on court, because now that I'm kind of calculating, it kind of aligns with the LTAD recommendations. And for everybody who's not familiar with the LTAD, this is like a fantastic long-term athletic development document.
We don't use that enough.
Yeah, I think there's so much great information. All the research, everything has been done for us. We just have to use it. But for anybody who's, let's say, don't want to go through pages, just simple formula for you to understand, like for your child, for your player. So that's fantastic. Dennis, I want to talk to you about, since we talked about hours and the recommendation from you and from LTD, from other fitness coaches. What are the I would say, the results of not following that, perhaps,
Yep.
or specializing in tennis, like you were saying, too early? Like, what are the results from maybe your perspective when you have to work with that kid maybe later
Yeah.
in their career, when they haven't followed that plan?
I love these questions, Bogdan. Like,
I'm on
man,
fire today. I don't know what I'm doing.
you're on it. You're on it. Yeah, these are great. These are things that we don't talk enough about, but they happen all the time. Okay, you need a cigarette, glass of water.
Exactly. Too much smoking
Yeah.
lately.
So you know what, the thing about that is, when I've seen athletes and they've gone through those stages where they've done over specialized training or anything, the number one thing I can say is we have players who are extremely frustrated, and it doesn't matter what age they're at. As frustrated as the parent might be or the coach might be, player is worse in their head. They are messed up completely. That's where we start seeing all this anxiety and stuff come out. That's where we start seeing a player who's a great practice player but a horrible competition player, because they think they have all these things to back up what they want to do, but they over specialize too early, and those things aren't solid for them. They really can't use it. And so if it's something you can't really apply, it's not really a tool in your tool bag. It's just an object that's there. You know, it's like taking a screwdriver and trying to hammer in a nail. It could kind of work, but it's not going to do as good a job as a hammer. And then same thing with using a screw. You can't hammer a screw in; it won't work. So you have to be able to know how to pick and choose the things. So if we can avoid overtraining and over specialization, that would be the key. But if we can't, which we can't because a lot of people just try these different things, then when we get that athlete back in, the first thing we have to do is go right back down to basics. So it's funny you just mentioned LTAD, because I've already mentioned all of the functional literacies and the physical literacies. Then we put LTAD in it at the same time. What people forget about this is people hear long-term athletic development and they think it has to do with things like, I'm going to do just these exercises at stage 1, and then at stage 2, I'm going to progress to these ones, and forever I'm going to be at stage 2. It's not the same thing. Think about school. School is the exact same idea. In the first grades, you learn your ABCs, your 1, 2, 3s, your colors, shapes, all that kind of stuff. You still use those all the way through school. You apply them in a whole bunch of different ways, but you still use them. And some of that what you learned was rote memory, and some of what you learned was creative application and memory. But you had to learn it and piece it all together for yourself. That's how you started formulating sentences instead of just having letters. That's how you started formulating words before sentences. That's how you started reading books instead of reading, one-liners. And it just keeps progressing from there. Well, sport is the exact same thing. What that means is that, when somebody gets injured, like let's say Nadal gets injured, then the first thing that happens is his team pulls back and regresses back to grade 5 or grade 4 and says, let's just look at your squat, or let's just look at your lunge, or let's just look at your, this to contact, and let's see if you're doing things right or if you're doing things wrong. That's where the fundamentals and the physical literacy are breaking down, and at what point we can transfer you back to what you need to do. So it doesn't matter who you are, how world class you are, how not world class you are, how young you are, how old you are, how in shape or how in shape you aren't. It's always about going back to those physical literacies and saying, we have to go here. So if an athlete walks in the door and they've been over specialized and overtrained, no matter what age they are, the first thing we have to do is go back to the basics, have them do basic lunges and basic movements and basic squats, find out where the problems are, and make them feel confident what we're trying to build up from there. I just looked at a girl the other day for tennis for exactly the same reason, and she's playing marvelously. She's playing really great. But what's happened is she's been working so much lately on tactical and technical that she's lost her fitness because she wasn't able to do as much fitness. And in working on her tactical and technical, she's stopping to watch her shot. She is not following through with 1 or 2 follow-through steps to keep momentum going. And she doesn't trust her braking mechanism. She doesn't trust putting the brakes on when she gets across the court really fast. So trying to explain to her coach and her father, they're not the same people, but trying to explain to those 2 people that the problem is when she looks like she's slow on court, she's not technically slow. I tested her for her running speed again. She has a great running speed still, but she can't run fast on a tennis court because her brain has already done the math and said, when I get to the other side of the court, which is 8 meters away, I have to stop, which requires a lot of breaks, and I have to hit a ball. So I can't run as fast as I want to because I can't stop as fast as I'll need to. So right away, the brain does the math and says, nope, we're going to run at this speed. We're not going to run at this speed. So the fact that she can run fast, but the fact that she isn't running fast on a tennis court is because she over specialized in one element of training and didn't keep the other things going to match what she wanted to do. If she's going to work on really high tactical stuff, she needs to make sure she has speed training going because she's now 15 years old. She needs to make sure she has speed training going to match the speed of the tactical approach you want to have. Tactical isn't just where do I want to place the ball. I got to get to that ball to place it where I want to put it.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. No, that's fascinating the way you describe this scenario. It's just mind blowing, and it kind of leads me into this. Hopefully, another great question. But but how can we as tennis coaches and perhaps parents, maybe off the court, notice that okay, this kid is like playing too much. We need to, like step down in terms of hours. We need to maybe do more fitness. Or less of everything, for if
exactly. Sometimes it is less of everything. You're right. It is another great question. So again, the benefit for me is, Bogdan, is that I'm not a tennis coach and I'm not their parent. So I'm very kind of on the side and not biased in any way. I have no agenda on how much tennis they play. My only agenda on how much tennis they're playing at the time or what they're doing is, are you able to do it? Are you healthy? Are we getting results? It's with fitness. Like I said to you, I won't tell parents, oh, you need to be here 5 times a week because I want to sell my business. There's a lot of parents I say only 2 times a week. Your kid can't handle more than that. They don't need more than that. Go and play another sport, do a few other things, get other talents, build it up. Or the older kids, here's the minimum they need. So when I look at that, what I look for is most kids that I see when they are having a problem and you're trying to figure out, are they overtrained or are they doing the wrong things? It comes down to the number one is the frustration, and the frustration happens away from the tennis court. I don't think a kid just throws tantrums on the tennis court because they still love tennis. They want to be there, but they're not getting the results they want. And like I said, a lot of these kids, when they are overtrained, are great practice players, but not great competition players. So you watch what they're doing just outside the court, how they interact with their friends when they're around the court, how much they warm up without being told to before they play matches. The kids really love what they're doing and competing and playing, they'll warm up well. When they're 15, 16, and they know how to warm up, they've been taught many times, they will do their warm up. If they're not having fun and they're getting burnt out and they're kind of sore, kind of tired, you'll see they won't warm up as much. They won't warm up with much intensity. They'll want to sit with headphones on or their phone or something like that, but they won't want to actually go out there and apply anything because in their head, they're like, here I go again. I just got to do this and just get through it. That's my attitude. Now, I'm not a sports psych coach, but I look for the cues away from either the fitness or the other things. I am fortunate because I do fitness that I often have kids come in here who they love being here because it's different. So I don't see them as bland or as offset sometimes, but I will see it when they're walking in. I will see it between their sets. I will see small little cues. And then I can talk to the parent or talk to the player and say, hey, how's it been going? What's happening? And then you get the information. Then you start getting the little tidbits of information of, oh, this isn't going so well. That's not going so well. Or I'm kind of frustrated with this. And then you can start to get them to talk about it a little bit more. So I think it's the stuff just off to the side of the court that you have to really pay attention to. Kids aren't going to tell you. Anybody who has a teenage kid is going to know that right away. They're not going to tell you. They're going to, they only tell you when they have a real problem with something and they're mad at you. They won't tell you all the other stuff that's going on in their life. But if you want to interact with their buddies and their mates and their friends, that's what you'll see, because when they're not interacting the same way you normally expect them to interact, something's up. When they're not acting the normal, when they're the free time, something's up. So I look at them away from the typical sport because they'll always act a certain way in the sport.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what I look at.
We talked a lot about, especially in the beginning, how the mental and physical components, they're very linked. Like that's why you want to run 45 minutes to not only just to see if you can physically handle it, but mentally can you keep persuading yourself that you can do it and you got to do it. Let's go. What are the things that you do personally as a performance strength and conditioning coach to improve your athletes' mental health, I guess, through fitness? Like, what are the other ways maybe you could suggest?
Sure.
Or just share your experience?
Yep. Well, I think the number one thing is with our younger athletes, what we do is we don't do repetitions. That's one thing. They perform reps, but we don't count them. So all the way up until about 12 or 14 years old, we rarely will give them, 2 sets of 10. It'll always be, you're doing 30 seconds, do as many as you can. Because in a group of kids who have 6 kids, you may have one kid who could do 20 reps, and another kid who can only do 3 reps. So now the kid who can only do 3 reps feels bad. Like, I'm not good enough. I can do as many as the other kids. So if I say 10, the 3-rep kid is struggling. And if I say 10 to the 20 kid, it's too easy to do 10, right? So if I give them 30 seconds, which is the element of physiology that we're working on, so I'm still using the science, then I can get them to both work at their maximum capacity. And they're so busy working, they're not paying attention to what the other one did or didn't do. So now it's not a race for reps so much. Now it's more about you work as hard as you can, you work as hard as you can you last for 30 seconds? And now the can you last for 30 seconds thing becomes mental, becomes physical, becomes a challenge, becomes breaking through some of that emotion. When a kid gets frustrated because they can't do an exercise, they get emotional. When they get emotional, if they have to keep pushing for the next 30 seconds, we say, come on, keep going, keep going, keep going. Then they learn to push through that emotional state and get back to the win state. Okay, I got it done. So that's good. I got through it. I didn't fall apart. And when they learn that they can get through something and not fall apart, they're building up more resilience and more resilience every single set or every single rep. So we kind of use it to boost them the right way and not limit them. I have no problem with saying 10 reps, but if I pick the right weight for that kid and I pick the right amount of time for that kid, I'll get them to do the reps I want them to do. I'll get them to work the parameter of fitness that we want them to work, but they won't be limited by how much they can or can't do. Does that make sense?
Smart. Yeah, that's so smart. And like I saw on your Instagram just before the show that you posted, one of the things that you want to focus on is like the form, not repetition. And that kind of goes in line exactly with your philosophy, just because again, if there's 30 seconds, I may do 5 with good form, for example, and that's great, good for you, and it's not like, okay, like I'm just gonna do like 10 as quickly, and like, okay, I do 10, but none of them was good form. Like, what's the point?
Right.
So that's
very, very important. Yeah. And then on the same note with that, Bogdan, what's also important, and you know this, especially as a tennis coach too, is sometimes as coaches, we have to not coach too much. There's times when I let them make mistakes for the first set. The first 30 seconds, every what they do might be wrong, but just do something, get moving, do it, accomplish this, work for 30 seconds. You're still working, you're still moving. Now I can tidy up your range. I can tidy up the entire group. I can pull the whole group in and say, okay, guys, that was not bad, but we have to work on this, this, and this. Here's the 2 cues I want you to focus on. And so as a coach, the art then is finding 1 cue to fix 3 things instead of 3 cues to fix 1 thing. Because kids won't get it. You can't bombard them with a list of things to do. They just won't follow it. So if we can get that back down to that 1 cue, really focus on the 1 cue for the next set, and they accomplish that task, and then we get another cue for the 3rd set, and they accomplish that task, and then they get better and better form. By the time they finish just that workout session that day, after doing 4 sets through the circuit they're doing, it's like, do you see how much better you're squatting now? And the kid goes, yeah, like I can really see it. And now, boom, triumph for them, win for them, right? It's them. They're doing the work. Yeah, it might be the coach, but I'm just telling them they're doing it. They have to do the work. I can't do it for them. Yeah. So if I give them that chance to do the work and actually win at it, they just succeeded. They succeeded. Bang. That's what we're going for every day. If we get, at the end of the day, if you get more wins than losses, you're always happy. If you get more losses than wins, you learn a lot. But if you learn along the way that when you're learning and when you're not always winning, you're still finding ways to see small things that you can figure out that's a good, that's a positive, then you don't take losses so hard anymore. Right? But if we let our kids always win and always feel like they're doing something perfect, then it's a problem. And then on top of that, if coaches overcorrect, the problem, and you see this in tennis all the time, I remember watching tennis players do it all the time, is you see a kid on court and they'll hit a ball and they'll hit the ball, just hit it wrong, pick the wrong shot, hit the ball poorly, like poor contact. And as soon as they finish the shot, finish the swing, they'll turn and they'll look around like they're looking for that person to say what to do differently. That's right. And that's because they're so used to having a coach telling them yep, good shot, yep, good shot, yep, good shot, yep, good shot, change this, yep, good shot, do that, change this. And they get used to that feedback almost too much. My big thing that I teach all my staff to do as well is we set up a circuit and we literally walk away a little bit and we'll coach from the other side of the room, or we'll coach from further away. I used to teach with the tennis coaches when I taught the coaching courses is walk to the other side of the tennis court and teach from there sometimes. Yell from there. Don't even demonstrate with the racket. Just yell your cue. See if they hear you and listen to you. That's coachability. We have to teach them coachability every single day. It's like owning a dog, and not saying everybody's kids are dogs, but they are learning the same way. We have to train them and teach them how to pull what they need. So if I give you a cue, it's up to you to use it. You have to grab it. And then if I give it to you again, you got to grab it. And if you give it to you again, you got to grab it. And eventually they learn, I better grab this, or I'm just going to keep getting the same cue yelled at me the whole time. And then when they start to grab it and they start to use it, they get it right. But when I don't throw it, I need them to also be able to think about it for themselves. So sometimes not coaching is the way to coach.
Yeah, 100%. And you brought up, again, a lot of good points in the sense that if me as a player, if I'm able to, whether it's within the 30 seconds when I'm doing those push-ups, I'm able to do 5, but the good ones, my confidence goes up, okay? If I'm able to execute a certain decision-making that you want me to do, I'm doing it, my confidence goes up. If I do it and maybe I'm not doing it how you want me to do it, but I'm learning from it, I still, okay, I got it now. My confidence goes up. And, you bring that, like if you leave the gym or whatever the environment you're in, the physical environment, and then you bring that confidence to the court, like you're a different player.
Exactly.
It changes your mindset. And I always remember like how numerous pros, because I keep listening to their conferences and, especially Australian Open, like it always fascinates me, Australian Open, because we have a lot of like a big off season, and many players are saying that, like I felt so confident because I worked so hard in the off season. And when I go on court, I feel confident, and I ask myself, why somebody else? Why not me? I worked so hard, man, in the last 2 months. Like I'm hungry. I want it. Like, come on, like, So it's just important link between what you do in the gym, what you do off the court, and then, how it's linked to your own court performance.
Yeah, I think, and again, it's easy again as a fitness coach to say, yeah, the gym's really important. It links perfectly. It's amazing. But the reality is, if you do it right, we can do so much more in the gym that you can't accomplish on a tennis court. Because on a tennis court, you're thinking through all the elements of the game. You're trying to remember all these things your coach taught you. You're trying to put all the things together. You're worried about how you look or how you're doing it. You're worried about if you make a mistake. In the gym, I don't care if you make a mistake. The first thing I tell a lot of kids who come to the gym, a quote that we use all the time is, failure is success in the gym. If I make you fail by giving you a really hard program, you're going to get better from that. That's success. If you're completely dead at the end of a set or a circuit and you're 15 years old, that's success. If you can push yourself that hard that you can't go anymore, then your opponent can't push you that hard. That's success. And so it's a different mentality that I can push things. It's not the movie mindset mentality. I'm screaming and yelling at kids. I don't have to scream and yell. If I have to raise my voice, I'm wasting my time and my effort. Get out of the gym. Go someplace else. Don't waste my time. Yeah. If I can just talk to you and give you good cues and know how to pick you apart a little bit just the right way, and you can make yourself work harder, I've done my job. Now I got to get out of your way and let you do it. I'm the creative element to putting together the program, but then I just got to get out of your way and let you do it and give you those small cues, and then let you connect those two things on the tennis court.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I can listen to to your knowledge like this and the expertise forever, But Dennis, it's been 1 hour. I want to let you go, and it's been amazing, and I feel like we need to do this again sometime. Like for maybe part
anytime, Bogdan. Love to do it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for sharing everything today, and all the best with your students.
Thank you, sir, and I hope you have happy holidays at the same time, and so do all your followers.
Thank you. Happy holidays.